The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. And why has this light shined? For a child has been born for us, a son given to us, authority rests upon his shoulder, and he is named Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, and his authority shall grow continually, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. What a great lectionary passage we have here from Isaiah today, the 9th chapter, a few verses from in that little pericope from 2 to 7. We begin with that because this is, are you ready? Merry Christmas Eve. Happy Advent, the fourth Sunday in Advent. Last Sunday doubles as Christmas Eve, and this is the last Sunday in our Advent Fruitcake series. We introduced the series with the pineapple. Then, if you remember, first Sunday in Advent, we featured the pomegranate. Then we went to the fig and date. Then we went last week to the apples and oranges. And this fourth Sunday, we are focusing on the importance of nuts, most specifically walnuts, pecans, hazelnuts, pistachios, macadamia nuts. Some people had the last two to them. But nuts in a fruitcake reminds us of something. And I see nuts as an acronym for never underestimate the Spirit. N-U-T-S. Never underestimate the Spirit. To take an unknown virgin and a nowhere Mary, one of the most common words in the first century. Everybody's named Mary, Mary and Mary, and make her into the mother of God in the second Eve. Never underestimate the Spirit. To take a little town of Bethlehem and make it into a beacon of peace and love and salvation to the whole world. Never underestimate the Spirit. To do the best of things in the worst of times. Never underestimate the Spirit. To turn an ordinary night into an oh holy night. So we celebrate nuts today, and people that have allowed themselves to go nuts. A nuts disciple. To all of you who live nuts lives, where you never underestimate the Spirit and what the Spirit can do in your life and in your church. But today we celebrate not just the nuts in a fruitcake, but we celebrate a fruit that is also mistaken for a nut, and that's the almond. Now, it's hard to find a fruitcake that does not feature almonds, again, which are not a nut, but the pit of a fruit, like a peach has a pit. And the almond has a pit, and this is the almond pit. It looks much like a peach pit, but you can eat it. You can't eat peach pit because it's got so much arsenic in it. But the almonds are actually good for you. Now, if you're not allergic to them, like I am. Now, almost every fruitcake, the almonds are there. It's an ingredient in the batter. Almond paste adds this rich, nutty flavor, moistness to the cake. As a filling or a swirl, almond paste can swirl to make in the cake batter, or you can actually pipe it into the center of a fruitcake to have this wonderful burst of flavor. Or almond paste can be used to make marzipan layer on top of the fruitcake. You can do it before or after baking. But almonds at Christmas, you get them in other ways than in a fruitcake. And in many of the Madonna and Holy Family paintings throughout Christian history and iconography, these Holy Family images of the Nativity, Madonna, they're framed in a mandorla. And a mandorla is the Italian word for almond. Now, a halo in a picture symbolizes a sacred person or sacred individual, but an almond in a painting or picture symbolizes not a person, but a sacred scene, a sacred moment, a sacred setting. And you've seen this almond-shaped radiant aureole emanating from sacred figures over and over again. You may not have noticed it, but let me give you some examples real quick. Here are some significant paintings in Christian history featuring mandolas that are framing the Nativity. A lot of mandolas framing Jesus' ascension, resurrection, but specifically this time of year, Advent and Christmas, you see paintings featuring. Here's Antonio de Maso, was an important painter in the 15th century who made his name creating altarpieces and religious art for churches. And this is his lovely, this beautiful mandola framed Madonna and Child. Here's Our Lady of Guadalupe, patron saint of Mexico. Almost always when you see Our Lady of Guadalupe depicted in a mandola. And here's one by Antonio de Torres, the Virgin of Guadalupe. Millions of people, by the way, make a pilgrimage to the Basilica in Mexico City to pay homage to this image that is framed in a mandola. Here's something in the National Gallery. The first time I saw it was in London. And this is the Virgin and Child in a mandola with cherubim. We're not really sure who did it, but it comes out of an Italian school of painting. Here's the Virgin with the Child in a mandola of winged cherubs, heads, saints, and musical angels by Mariotto Donardo. This is 14th century. And here is Jacopo Robusti Tintoretto, the Madonna and Child in a mandola on a crescent moon and clouds. Okay. Tintoretto was famous in his time because he could produce a painting in record time, and he had real bravery and boldness with his brushwork, and so other painters, his colleagues, were both jealous and kind of critical of how fast he could paint, and he painted so furiously. He was nicknamed El Furiso, or El Furioso. Now you say, okay, this is all interesting, Sweet, but what does this have to do with the Bible? Well, if I had to pick out one fruit that in many ways ties the whole story together from Genesis to the maps, it wouldn't be the olive, it wouldn't be the fig, it wouldn't be the cypress, it wouldn't be acacia, although those are all important trees that identify who Israel is, but I'd pick the almond tree. The Hebrew word for almond is derived from the same root as the verb for keep watch, be awake, be vigilant. And that's why it was called the awakening tree, because it was the first tree in the winter to bud, and it was the last tree to bring fruit. So while all the other trees are kind of still dormant and sleeping in winter, the almond awakens. It's also known as the Alpha and the Omega tree. And the first and last tree. Now, there's also this Christmas prophecy, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. That's Isaiah 11:1, just a couple chapters after our lectionary passages today. The Hebrew word for branch is netzer. The boyhood home of Jesus was Nazareth, called Netzaret in Hebrew. It means the place of the branch. And so the fact that the Messiah himself came from a town, when it says Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of the branch. And the New Testament writers constantly call Jesus of Nazareth or Jesus of the branch. You see it mentioned over and over again, this prophecy related to the branch, by the way. You got Isaiah 4:2, 11:1, Zechariah 3:8, 6:12, Jeremiah 23:5. And over again, you have this Jesus of Nazareth in the New Testament. Gabriel visited Mary and Joseph in Nazareth. The soldiers at the empty tomb saw Jesus of Nazareth. Blind Bartimaeus in Mark 1:24 knew Jesus of Nazareth. the soldiers who had arrested him in Gethsemane saw Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of the branch. And when he was crucified, remember, Pilate preached the first sermon. Jesus of Nazareth, King of a global sermon, King of the Jews, because it was in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Now, no one knows what the tree of Jesse was, the stump of that tree, of the Jesse tree. Jesse of Bethlehem, though, father of David, we know was a fruit tree. But what kind of fruit tree? What kind of branch? Now, most scholars think it was an olive tree, but I don't think so. I think it was an almond tree. And remember, almonds are not nuts, but a type of stone fruit called the drupe. Now, we mentioned before, we talked about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil when we did the fig and the pomegranate. But what kind of tree? Remember, there's this other tree. There was two major trees mentioned in the garden. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, don't eat from it. But the tree of life. What kind of tree of life? What kind of Jesus of the branch? What kind of branch did the first Adam have? Because the last Adam was from the place called the branch. What was the first Adam? This tree of life that kept breathing life, the breath of God that constantly breathed, the breathings that gave the first humans immortality. And I think the tree of life was an almond tree. One of the most important trees in the Bible, but not celebrated as such. One of the proposed locations of Mount Sinai is a place called the Mountain of Almonds. What was Aaron's rod? It wasn't a rod. In the morning when they went in to the tent of meeting, all the heads of all the tribes, there's one staff had turned from a rod into what? An almond branch. An almond branch. And on that branch were three things: buds, blossoms, and fruit. How important was Aaron's rod? Well, it wasn't a rod, it was an olive branch. But almond branch. How important was the almond branch? Well, it was placed not in the Ark of the Covenant, but before the Ark of the Covenant. In the Ark of the Covenant, the Ten Commandments and the manna. But in front of the Ark of the Covenant, like leading the way into the future, was this almond branch. It also confirmed Jeremiah's call, remember? In Jeremiah 1, the word of the Lord came to me saying, this is reading here, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Oh, sovereign Lord, Jeremiah said, I do not know how to speak. I'm too young. But the Lord said to me, do not say I'm too young, Jeremiah. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you. I will rescue you, declares the Lord. The Lord reached out God's hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. And the word of the Lord came to me, what do you see, Jeremiah? And Jeremiah replied, you remember? I see the branch of an almond tree. And then God says, the Lord said to me, good eyes. For I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled. What Jeremiah is seeing is Aaron's rod, but is now an almond branch. And he's to continue, like the almond branch was before he was to continue leading the people of Israel. You say, well, that's interesting. I'm still, okay. What was the golden lampstand? It was not a lampstand. It was an almond tree of 7 branches, each one with buds, blossoms, and fruit. read Exodus 25:31-40. The same with Aaron's rod, on which were buds, blossoms, and fruit. So with the golden lampstand. The golden lampstand, the only source of light in the holy place. Its primary purpose was to give light in front of the Holy of Holies. It was a shine on the table, though, of showbread, and never to be put out. It was never to stop shining. This was a constant reminder God was with God's people, but it's not a lampstand. It's a full almond tree on every branch of all 7 branches. Oh, by the way, what's the symbol of the people of Israel? Not the state of Israel, but the Jewish people. The symbol of the state of Israel is the Star of David, but the symbol of the people of Israel, the Hebrew people, is the menorah. What's the menorah? A golden lampstand. What's a golden lampstand? It's an olive tree with 7 branches. And the golden lampstand, this is huge, within the holy place, symbolizes the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. And plus you have all this floral imagery permeating throughout the temple, which symbolizes the whole Garden of Eden. But here we have, once again, if you read carefully, the symbolism is insistent and consistent that on every almond branch, there is a bud, blossom, and fruit. You say, why is that so significant, Sweet? Well, it's huge. God cares. Oh, yes, God cares about the fruit. By the fruit you know them. But God cares also about the buds and the blossoms. And it's by the fruit you know them, but by the buds and the blossoms, fruit you will be known, buds and blossoms you will be judged. Because we are called to do in our lifetime things that will not just come to fruition within our lifetimes, but will plant seeds that maybe will bud. And if we're really fortunate, we'll live to see the blossoms. But only a few times will we be there long enough to see the fruits of what we have planted. And God cares. God's one day goes, well, show me your buds. Show me your blossoms. Okay, I can see your fruits. I love the jacaranda tree. Here's an image of one. A jacaranda tree takes 16 to 30 years before it yields its first flowers. In other words, it takes 16 to 30 years to come to the point where it reaches a blossom and fruition stage. If your mission can be completed in your lifetime, maybe it isn't a big enough mission. It may be started, but what you start, you may never live to see come to pass. But that's why they took the bones of Joseph with them, to remind them that they were still living out of the plantings and seedings of their ancestors. And so this is why Jesus is the tree of life. This baby Jesus became the fruit of the new tree of life, the cross. The new Adam, the Alpha and the Omega tree. And the fruit of this new tree of life is the fruit that saved the world. And by using this symbol of the almond, this mandorla, especially during the winter solstice time, Christmas tide, early Christians were attempting to say that Jesus is the awakening of this life-giving light that we began today with in this reading from Isaiah. Now, I want to show you this little how a mandorla is formed is you have two circles and you overlap or bring them together and overlap, and you get this right here, this mandorla. And this is the, I call it the sweet spot, face fertile crescent right here. What Jesus did, he is the mandorla here. He brought together heaven and earth. And in that sweet spot, he brought together the divine and the human. And in that sweet spot, right here, he brought together the lion and the lamb. And in that sweet spot, that's where you live, right here. The first and the last, right here, at the same time, you bring them together. Fully human, fully divine. Jesus, fully both. You bring them together and you live in that sweet spot, that mandorla. And by the way, the earliest Christian symbol is just a mandorla that opens up, the ichthus. And so we have today the celebration, this last Sunday of Advent, this Christmas Eve, celebration of the giver and source of life, the very tree of life. And with this almond that you hold in your hand, and I'm going to encourage you to pass out a little almond to everybody in your church that they could kind of look at it and hold it, and then maybe if they're allergic to it like I am, eat it. To remind ourselves that the light that came into the darkness over 2,000 years ago, that light continues to shine within each of us and through each of us. And the flame of that candle, which looks like an almond, reminds us in this almond shape of the symbol of watchfulness and promise, new beginning, and the light that banishes the darkness. So today, or tonight, rejoice that one small child born to us in Bethlehem has fulfilled God's greatest promise of all. Jesus is Emmanuel, which means God with us. Jesus is the first bud on the branch of Jesse, our King from the line of David. He is the fruit of the life, the tree of life, from the Alpha and the Omega tree, the cross on which he died to save us all. And in his birth, the light has dawned in the darkness. So as you exchange gifts tonight and enjoy family festivities, may you use this almond to remind us of the watchful love that never sleeps nor slumbers. God has awakened salvation in Jesus Christ, granting us new life in his name. And we are held within the mandorla, that sweet space where heaven and earth meet, where God's promises overflow into the human realm even now. Thanks be to God for this gift beyond measure, the light of the world. Amen.